One policy that has been used for the past 40 years to help reduce racism is affirmative action. The concept is centered on the idea that decisions today should account for the lack of opportunities that some groups have historically experienced and should help equalize the playing field. It focuses now on achieving a more diverse group of people in education and the workplace. Higher education is using affirmative action to help promote two kinds of diversity, both diversity of viewpoints as well as racial diversity. There is tension regarding which one of these strategies should be used, and there is no agreement by courts as to which one should be used. On top of that, there's a third model of diversity that's emerging, one that blends the other two models. This third model encourages entry of certain group members on both racial grounds as well as diversity of viewpoints. It follows this line of reasoning that if diversity of viewpoint is the goal, then that can be achieved by using racial group membership as a factor. Thus, it will utilize both the racial lens and the race-neutral aspect of colorblindness to achieve diversity. Affirmative action has been considered by the courts, and the ambiguity of this term can be illustrated by the varying decisions. When the issue of affirmative action was first considered by the U.S. Supreme Court in Regents v. Bakke, Bakke was a case where a white male was denied entrance into the UCLA Davis Medical School. Bakke challenged the school practice of setting aside a predetermined number of seats for minority race candidates. The issue was framed in the opinion as one of increasing educational diversity at the medical school, which was seen as a legitimate goal. Thus, this opinion allowed schools to set goals of increasing diversity and having selection processes to do that. But in Hopwood v. Texas, the law school's policy of race-based admissions was challenged. The U.S. Supreme Court determined that admission policies needed to be race-neutral, though it could use many different areas of diversity as selection factors, such as academic history, socioeconomic history, and extracurricular activities. Because the court did not acknowledge any link between racial group membership and life experiences, it created a mixed message in its decision. More recently, the U.S. Supreme Court considered Grutter v. Bollinger, where the University of Michigan's law school race-based admissions program was called into question. The court upheld the idea of diversity as a factor in admission programs, and if it was race-based, it would not be called into question. The different opinions, all rendered from the same court, makes the law very ambiguous and does not give a strong sense of what the courts will or will not do to uphold different policies. You can see how the preceding decisions don't give much guidance on what kind of diversity considerations should be given to admissions in higher education. Is it race-based or is it life experience-based? Thus, a new concept has emerged in that the goal should be to foster diversity in higher education as a way of creating a place for meaningful re-examination of the structures and institutional logics that maintain white privilege. Affirmative action must strive to rethink social categories and develop alternatives to the way people are classified. Not only our educational system, but also our cities need to consider how to undo racism. Bob Knight, former mayor of Wichita, Kansas, called for a renewal of what he called the American spirit. He believed that to improve equality, that racism had to be confronted and addressed head-on. Knight believed that racism had to be discussed amongst the different groups, and that fear, frustration, and emotions had to be set aside. He launched a national initiative which focused on 4 objectives: examining the current state of the city's racial climate, implementing an action plan, identifying a future vision for the city, and communicating ideas. He emphasized the importance of strong leadership and commitment to undoing racism and leaving a legacy of renewal and hope. A different model was created in Porto Alegre, Brazil, which is called participatory decision-making. Citizens were encouraged to be part of the financial and planning process to determine the use of the city's revenue. One goal of this project was to reduce inequalities by attempting to achieve true representation in decision-making and citizen empowerment. Through this process, the city has reduced social exclusiveness and has improved the connection among local organizations. Racism needs to be undone on a variety of levels: the self, the inner circle of family and friends, the greater institutional level, and at a national level. Each one of these levels will utilize different strategies to facilitate change. The first step is changing oneself, using self-training to identify, analyze, and expel one's own prejudices. This is not easy and takes work and commitment. Most people prefer not to examine their own unconscious racism. But making the commitment to work on oneself and examine unconscious biases allows people to actively work towards anti-racism. The second level of change is our inner circle. What does one do when one encounters a racist remark? Nod in agreement, ignore it, raise issues of discomfort, or challenge the person on their remarks? Part of undoing racism is holding others accountable and starting the dialogue about the remarks and exposing them as unacceptable. Raising the issues encourages others to self-reflect. The next level is the institutional level. This means challenging any organizational or institutional practices that hint at racism. This could be at work or where we worship, play sports, or other organized activities. We can also be involved and invested at the national level by writing to elected officials. Charles Gallagher suggested 10 simple things each one of us can do to help undo racism. Have discussions about race. Hold people accountable for racist comments. Be aware of language that is used and stay on the lookout for generalizations about racial or ethnic groups. Introspect about your own thoughts and language that you use. Be a leader by example in your own community. Be active in politics.